My topic is putting America back to work. I'm only giving myself about 6 minutes to do that, so you have to pay attention. It is no mystery. It's no secret. There's nothing hard to figure out about it. That the best way to create large numbers of high-paying jobs is public works. We have known that for a long time. We're at a point economically in this country that I haven't experienced in my lifetime, and I'm 62 years old. There wasn't another period that was worse, but not that much worse. I heard all my life that statistic that during the Great Depression, about 25% of Americans were out of work. And I was always stunned by that, to think, wow, how could that possibly be 25% of Americans out of work? In California, we're creeping above 12.5. Certain regions are closer to 15%. So we're almost there. Everybody in every branch of government is desperately trying to figure out how do you create more jobs. That usually is a function of money. If you want to create more jobs, you need money. How do you get that money? Do you raise taxes? Do you cut taxes? Do you just go into deficit spending? So that's what most people in most levels of government think about. I want to talk to you about at least a concept that we've gotten started at OCTA. It's an alternative concept that I think shows a lot of promise. We're pushing hard on it, and I think we're getting somewhere. But again, the model I'm going to talk about, next slide, we know well. It's about 70 to 80 years old now, and it was the WPA. It was during the Great Depression. And from 1935 to the early part of 1942, America spent $11 billion on public works projects. If you adjust that for dollars today, you can well imagine what that is. You're creeping toward probably $250 billion. The lesson to be learned from all that is that what put America back to work? It wasn't in and of itself. Unfortunately, World War II was also a big part of it. But the WPA plus World War II is what put America back to work. It would not have happened without WPA projects. It is, again, the fastest way to create large numbers of high-paying jobs. And another lesson to be learned from this is we are still using many of the roadways and the parkways and the dams and the water treatment plants and all the other infrastructure facilities that were built by crews like this. Even I think that crew in the bottom is still working somewhere out of Fresno, but they'll be done soon. But we are still using all of that infrastructure that they created. So if you were to amortize that $11 billion over 80 years, you tell me what the real cost of that to the United States was. Every $1 billion invested in highway infrastructure creates up to 18,000 jobs. We've demonstrated that in this county. It's been demonstrated in other California counties. Anyone can do the math. I can't do that math, but there are people that can. $1 billion equals 18,000 jobs. Each dollar invested in the highway system yields a $5.60 return in economic benefits. So it's a multiplier effect of over 500%. Transportation infrastructure accounts for 11% of our nation's economic activity. That is a huge component of the nation's economy. Again, a big part of it is the multiplier effect. As you come down from the kind of immediate contractors in that project and kind of a series of concentric rings, the other vendors and suppliers and workers and companies of just an incredibly diverse range that are put to work by those projects. If you want to look at how each of those $1 billion in transportation breaks down, the jobs created by the multiplier effect I just talked about account for about 50% of that $1 billion expenditure. The direct construction jobs are about 34%, and then the suppliers who keep those contractors going, whether it's equipment, materials, account for the rest of it. You've heard a lot of talk, good and bad, about the first federal stimulus bill, which was touted as a jobs bill. that was going to put America back to work. It didn't take very long for everyone to figure out that it wasn't really a jobs bill, it was a spending bill. What has been very frustrating to me is to listen to people criticize that and say, well, you know, we spent $750 billion, and it didn't really create that much jobs, did it? Those public works projects that were going to be funded, it didn't create that many jobs, did it? By the way, do you remember when $1 billion was a lot of money? Now it's $1 trillion. Now $1 billion is like a rounding error. So all of a sudden, everything now is $1 trillion. So this was $750 billion, and people criticize it. I'm going to show you. I'll let you guess first. If you look at that entire circle of the stimulus package, I will let you guess how big is the circle of specific, targeted transportation funding within that $750 billion, and this is how big it is. Out of that $750 billion, $48 billion was spent on transportation. Pretty tiny. And it had some effect. It didn't have the desired effect. It certainly didn't have the effect that the bill was sold under, which is a jobs bill. But had that been greatly increased, we would have benefited much more from it. To give you an idea of where the other $700 billion or so was spent, I'll let you read this for yourself. I think my absolute all-time favorite is bullet number 6, $7.2 billion for expanded broadband to rural areas. Because when I sit around and I worry about what's wrong with America, that is what I am desperately concerned about. A better cable signal in rural areas, which probably created jobs for about 60 cable installers. So I would desperately have liked to have had that $7.2 billion for anything. For our projects, for LA Metro's projects, for Kurt's high-speed rail projects, all of that would have created exponentially more jobs than that item. And as you read the entire list, you can kind of see where the frustration is. Those of us who have been in the transportation game for a long time spend a lot of time in Sacramento and in Washington basically begging for money, looking for money for our projects. We spend a lot of time talking about how the freeway interchange that we want to build is the most important project in the country. We really need the money. If you'll just give us the money, give us the $150 million or the $200 million, this is a wonderful thing. Unfortunately, the moment we walk out in, say, meeting with Congresswoman Sanchez, Georgia DOT walks in behind us and explains how their freeway interchange is the most important project in the country. So we all play this game, and we do as well as we can in our respective roles in our state capitals and in Washington. About a year and a half ago, I began to think, if we are really as far in the tank as we believe we are economically, and we really need to create large numbers of jobs, it isn't just a question of finding money for new projects. If you look at projects which are already funded, for which money has been appropriated, money has been encumbered, contracts have been let, but those projects are stuck in processing at the state and federal level, there's got to be a lot of jobs buried there. So we developed a program that we came to call Breaking Down Barriers. At this point, the program is targeting the federal process, but much of what I'll talk about also applies to the state process. We met close to a year ago, actually, I'm sorry, a little over a year ago, was our first meeting with the White House. I must say, not only were we well received, quite surprised me, having been through that process of pitching them on something before, but we were enthusiastically received. I and Will Kempton, CEO of OCTA, former director of Caltrans. Did I get it all in? Is there anything else I missed? Okay. We have been back a couple of times. That enthusiasm level has gotten higher. The interest has gotten higher. And in fact, I often tell a story about the one gentleman that we've been meeting with the most. I could literally see the recognition in his eyes when he said, "How many jobs are we talking about?" And I said, "Well, from our kind of initial research, we're certainly talking about hundreds of thousands of jobs nationally." And he said, "And these are for projects that are paid for?" I said, "Absolutely. These are projects that are paid for, appropriated, Money's in the bank, contracts have been let. They're stuck in financing across town at FHWA and DOT and all of the agencies. I could see it in his eyes. His eyes popped open. And he came up with a line that I immediately stole, which is he said, I don't think the American people would like to know that there are hundreds of thousands of jobs stuck in paperwork. So that accounted for their enthusiasm. Now I want to give you just very quickly a few of the specifics that we're talking about. And we've expanded this circle. We've expanded this circle to Texas DOT, to Oklahoma, to other states, Pennsylvania. We've had no less interest from them because they also see the point of how much job creation we're talking about. A lengthy tip amendment process is a huge problem. Being able to delegate that process, which many of you are familiar with, would remove many months from the process. Limited bidding options with no pre-award authority. If they could allow TIP projects to proceed, to move forward without being constrained in that way, that would be a help. It was done here, being able to go with design build on the Garden Grove Freeway. The schedule was cut by almost 2 years. That $600 million project created 10,800 jobs. That's 2 years cut off a project schedule, and that is months that become years of more quickly getting jobs in place, getting jobs on the street. This slide is what I call the controversial slide because, again, those of you who have been at this for a while, the term we've tried hard not to use for this process is streamlining. Streamlining is also not a new idea. People have promoted streamlining for many years, and it usually refers to the environmental process. This is not a good time to be proselytizing for streamlining. Certainly not after things like the Gulf oil spill. We are not going to win the fight to say, look, let's have less environmental regulation. We're not saying that at all. We're saying do as much environmental analysis and processing as you want, just do it faster and smarter. One quick example, which I suspect almost everyone in this room is aware of. CEQA and NEPA. CEQA is much more stringent than NEPA. But after you spend months, and in some cases over a year, in the CEQA process, you have to go through the NEPA process. You may not be done. Federal agencies have to sign off on the NEPA process. They have to say, yep, reviewed that. That project is A-OK. The problem is you now have to go back to get your permits from all these federal agencies one at a time. Agencies tend not to pay too much attention to the NEPA process because they know they can torture you all the way back to square one when you come back for your permit. If you can wrap that whole permitting process into the NEPA process and get certain exemptions for projects where CEQA services as the NEPA approval, that in many of the major projects that I'd work on, that literally would cut many months, and again in some cases years, off of project delivery and creating jobs. So in summary, typically annually under the transportation bill in recent years, $48 billion. That $48 billion represents 868,000 jobs. Right now, we've got from the existing and long expired transportation bill and other funding mechanisms, we've got at least projects of that magnitude that basically are in processing. And they're going to be in processing for many more months. And new projects are going to go into that big processing mesh of gears and take months and months, and in some cases years, to come out the other end. We can really improve that system if we can get the federal agencies and the states to cooperate. And as I say, the DOTs that we've talked to in other states, they're as excited about this as we are. So that, in a pretty big nutshell, but kind of a nutshell, is my whole story. That's all I have to tell you. Thank you very much.